Thank you, President Heislope, members of the City Council, President Curtin, members of the Board of Education, members of the administrative staff, Clerk Ayala, distinguished guests, and my fellow New Londoners. The Charter of the City of New London requires me to report annually to the City Council and to the public on the state of our city. This year, at last, I can report that the state of our city is strong. That's a phrase too often used by politicians, even when it's not accurate. But tonight, it is a truth made self-evident by the work we've done to get here. In previous addresses on the state of our city, I've had to announce that under the old form of city government, the city had not budgeted accurately, and that rather than raising taxes, prior city councils had opted to spend our financial reserves. That these reserves being gone, I've had to announce austerity measures that cut into every department, reducing our city workforce by 25%. Indeed, just 1 year ago, I stood here and told you that we were out of money and that we were out of time, and that we were either going to crash and burn, or we were going to come together as a community and we were going to fix this. Well, we didn't crash, and we didn't burn. We came together and we have fixed this. I have never been so proud of our city as I was last November 4th, when New Londoners voted by a nearly 2-to-1 margin to invest in our schools, to pass our budgets, and to approve the bonding which allowed us to replenish our fund balance, stabilize our cash flows, and preserve our credit rating. Renters, homeowners, people in every voting district affirmed the path that we mapped out in last year's budget and gave us a mandate to continue. Just weeks later, Dr. Manuel J. Rivera, a former National Superintendent of the Year and New York State Deputy Secretary of Education, came back to his hometown to accept the position of New London Superintendent of Schools. We could not have a better superintendent as we transition to the first all-magnet regional school district in our state. Dr. Rivera, thank you. This transition that we are now about to undertake would not, or would be, much more expensive had we not pulled ourselves out of a deep financial hole. Last week, a preliminary report by the City Council's auditor showed that after years of deficit spending, we've balanced the city budget for the second year in a row. Our finance director, Mr. Smith, has also confirmed that we're on track to balance this year's budget by June 30th. Equally important, last April, our financial cushion was so low that we wouldn't have been able to meet payroll had the state of Connecticut not granted us an advance on our education cost-sharing funds. Well, now our audit shows that we ended the last fiscal year with a fund balance of $2,319,321, an increase of 57%. This year also, the bonding approved by voters last November will boost our fund balance by an additional $1.1 million. City Treasurer Reinhardt now reports that we have turned our city's cash flows from a negative to a positive, and we no longer need to worry that the City of New London will not be able to pay its bills. Now, had we not implemented and adhered to a fund balance replacement plan, we would not have maintained our bond rating, and our future school construction and infrastructure projects would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars more. I have said all along that stabilizing our finances and improving our schools are both key to New London's overall revitalization. With these actions, the City of New London has struck out boldly on a new and more stable fiscal path. And there is other good news to report tonight as well. A key initiative assisting in New London's revitalization is the National Coast Guard Museum project. This past year, the project took a giant leap forward when James Coleman Jr., chair of the National Coast Guard Museum Association, bought New London's Union Station. Mr. Coleman is committed to preserving this historic landmark, has the resources to invest in it, and is equally committed to to ensuring the museum's overall construction. Just last week, the Museum Association announced that they are at 25% of their fundraising goal and are keeping to the project's timetable. There is also cause for excitement in New London because this year is the 225th anniversary of the United States Coast Guard. New London will be celebrating Connecticut's Coast Guard Summer with Coast Guard-related events and activities on our waterfront. I will be honored to join the Commandant of the Coast Guard, Governor Malloy, and others in inaugurating this great season of celebration on the New London waterfront. And while on the subject of the Coast Guard, I will also say that all New Londoners should join me in expressing our pride in and admiration for the Superintendent of the United States Coast Guard Academy, Rear Admiral Sandra Stowes, for having been nominated by President Obama to be the Deputy Commandant of the United States Coast Guard. Admiral Stowes, thank you for joining us tonight. You will always be a New Londoner, and your leadership at the Academy has brought the Academy and the city closer together and strengthened the long-lasting partnership that we share. President Obama made a wise choice in his selection, and we all wish you every success. And speaking of the President, this year President Obama gave New London a shout-out in his State of the Union address. New London, like Annapolis, Colorado Springs, and West Point, is finally on the national map. I hope that this national recognition for our city and for the Coast Guard Academy continues, so that generations of Coast Guard officers will be able to say, with pride of their Academy days, I went to New London. Now, as our magnet school and museum projects move forward, we are indeed seeing economic investment return to New London. At long last, development is slated for Fort Trumbull. AR Builders approached the administration several months ago with a proposal to build 104 high-end housing units on the Fort Trumbull Peninsula. I have worked closely with AR, with EB, and with the Renaissance City Development Association to move this project forward. RCDA's board has given preliminary approval to proceed, and now the plan is before the City Council for review and approval. This is a shovel-ready project. Once final approvals are granted, this project should break ground this summer, growing our grand list and helping our city turn an important corner at Fort Trumbull. This June 23rd, our city will mark the 10-year anniversary of the United States Supreme Court's ruling in the case of Kelo v. City of New London. For 10 years, I have been a constant and consistent critic of this opinion, and I remain hopeful that the Supreme Court will overturn this case in the near future. 4 years ago, I ran for mayor on a promise to abolish the NLDC and return control over the destiny of the Fort Trumbull Peninsula to the people of the city of New London. I made every effort to fulfill this promise. To his great credit, Governor Malloy was willing to allow the city to take title to the land at Fort Trumbull before proceeding with development. Several councilors voiced support for this initiative, and numerous residents signed petitions and spoke up in the hopes that we as a community would finally take direct responsibility for the development project at Fort Trumbull. The forces of institutional resistance, ironically local and not at the state or national levels, rose up in strong opposition to this plan. A supermajority vote of the City Council is needed to accomplish the title transfer that would effectively dismantle the NLDC framework designed over 15 years ago, and it is simply not there. The effort to abolish the NLDC has come a day late and has fallen a vote short. And so now we must move on. Lost homes can never be replaced, and the city will never again have this opportunity to take control of its own development project. But all hope in this regard is not lost. The old leaders of the NLDC are no longer involved in the operation and management of this development agency. The organization has chosen a new name and new leaders who joined the organization after eminent domain was used at Fort Trumbull. I pledge to the City Council and to all the people of New London tonight to work with the RCDA and the Council to see meaningful development move forward at Fort Trumbull without delay. We will not, however, move forward without acknowledging the mistakes of our past. I can announce tonight that a memorandum of agreement has been reached between my administration and the leadership of RCDA that will dedicate the property formerly owned by Suzette Kilo near the fort itself as a permanent public park and permanent public land in the Fort Trumbull neighborhood. It is my personal hope that this park will serve as a memorial to all those adversely affected by the city's use of eminent domain. I believe that this gesture is significant, although I acknowledge that some will say it is inadequate, as I am sure others will say it is unnecessary altogether. It is not a perfect compromise. No compromise ever is. At least this action allows us to acknowledge our mistakes and our differences as we move on. So let us do that, and then let us move on. And move on we must, for from Fort Trumbull to other areas of interest throughout our city, developers are ready to move, and New London has waited long enough to see our economic fortunes improve. There are several other shovel-ready development projects slated to move forward this year in New London, and I hope that they will be announced and approved soon, giving all New London taxpayers hope that we are finally growing our grand list in a meaningful way. All economic development in New London is not large-scale, however. Retail shops, which opened last fall as part of the Create Here Now initiative, continue to enliven downtown, and unemployment in the city in general has dropped to its lowest level since before the Great Recession began 7 years ago. Progress can be seen on other fronts as well. According to FBI data gathered by the NLPD, violent crime has dropped 41% in the City of New London between 2011 and 2014, and our department reports today that it has dropped an additional 20% in the first 3 months of this year. I thank the members of the NLPD for their hard work and for their commitment, as I thank all residents of our city for being able partners in reducing crime. This administration will continue to implement community policing protocols and will work to implement body cameras department-wide so that we continue to reduce crime while protecting good officers against false accusations and provide assurance to the public that we are as resolute in our stand against crime as we are in our stand for civil rights. We are also, as a city, investing in our infrastructure. Upgrades to the municipal parking lots will make them more attractive and usable. Architects are now developing plans to better connect Riverside Park to the Winthrop School. We're addressing the Pequot Avenue seawall and drainage issues, and road and sidewalk paving projects continue throughout the city. In short, we have many projects underway and many reasons to be optimistic. Yet even after having accomplished so much and with so many possibilities within reach, I have to caution you that this is an election year, and our city's progress depends on our ability to set politics aside to do what is right for New London. I do not personally believe that New London has a good history in this regard. We've had a tendency to support or oppose initiatives based on whether New London politicians like or dislike the person who introduced them. New London politicians through the years have tended to play the person, not the policy. That is why I removed myself as a mayoral candidate during last year's State of the City address. I could not let politics jeopardize the magnet school bonding plan and the passing of an honest and realistic budget. I reversed that decision this year because I am committed to see the magnet school plan, the Coast Guard Museum, and our financial solvency plans through to completion, but I am concerned that my return to the mayoral race could inject politics into our budget debate this year. I hope that will not be the case, and here's why. In 2011, City Manager Denise Rose proposed a budget which would have required a significant tax increase, the first increase in several years. In her budget report to the council, she talked about rising utility costs, unfunded mandates, contractual obligations, worker compensation and other benefits liabilities, and a loss of $500,000 in revenue from the state. But in 2011, 4 city councilors were running for mayor. No one wants to be the candidate who votes for a tax increase in an election. Consequently, that city council decided not to raise taxes, even while they increased expenditures by $1 million. They tinkered with the numbers, adjusted anticipated revenues upwards without adequate justification, and anticipated expenses downward, contrary to legal spending mandates, until it all looked good on paper. But reality isn't made of paper. Numbers don't lie, and political ideologies cannot, by sheer force, impose themselves on mathematics. Reality, it turns out, was a one-year, $3.7 million deficit that hit New London hard. After decades of deficit spending, that budget pushed us to the brink, and we are still, in many ways, recovering from its aftermath. Headed into another mayoral and council election, this history cannot repeat itself. During these last 3 years, this administration, the City Council, and the Board of Education have worked together to lay out a path for a better future for our city, and voters have overwhelmingly approved it. We can't now, in this year, let politics knock us off course. In the months to come, whoever we do or don't elect isn't nearly as important as making sure that we stay on this path. We need to continue investing in our schools, balancing our budgets, rebuilding our fund balance, and maintaining our assets, regardless of the political consequences. Mayors and city councilors will come and go and be little remembered decades hence. But New London goes on, and New London must not falter. Now, I must also say, as a member of a South End New London tax-paying family, I fully understand the need for tax relief. There's no question that the tax burden placed on Connecticut's urban centers is unfair and regressive. The amount of money we receive from the state as payment in lieu of taxes has gone steadily down in recent years. Our property tax system ensures that residents of cities like New London pay very high car taxes, while residents of wealthy suburbs like Greenwich or Darien pay very little. I've traveled to Hartford a number of times this year to testify in favor of bills which would make our tax system fairer and bring more revenue to New London. I have worked closely with Speaker Brendan Sharkey and Senate President Martin Looney on these issues, and thanks to their leadership, I believe that this year our legislature will finally enact meaningful pilot and motor vehicle tax reform. New London is also now in the process of hiring a grants writer who will help the city increase outside aid, thereby reducing the burden placed on our taxpayers. Our lifting and new development at Fort Trumbull and elsewhere will be expanding our tax base. So we can expect more revenue in the future. Today, however, a hard truth remains. The path to a better New London comes with a price. No magic bullet is going to make that price go away. But the money we collectively pay to educate our children, to keep our residents safe, to improve our roads and maintain our buildings is an investment which pays dividends in the quality of life, helps grow jobs, and helps expand economic opportunities for all in our city. Ultimately, these investments will pay dividends in the form of rising property values, increasing New London's revenues, and reducing our tax burden. But we must invest now to see that future return. But before I present this year's budget, I want to reiterate to the City Council and to the public how much smaller our government is now than it used to be. At one time, we had 80 people in our fire department. We now have 70. We had 97 officers in our police department. With 2 new hires tomorrow, we will have 67. We had 26 people in our finance department. Now we have 15. In 2003, we had 70 people in our public works department. Now we have 45. To put this in context, consider that Electric Boat has as many full-time employees on their grounds crew for their facility just on Pequot Avenue as we have for the maintenance of all of our city parks and grounds, including our schools. We have fallen similarly behind in our vehicles and equipment. 2 of our frontline plows date from the 1980s, and 2 more are from the 90s. Our DPW mechanics say that our oldest plows will not survive another winter and must be replaced. In our police department, our newest vehicles are 2010s with an average of 80,000 miles on them, and more than 50% of our fleet is due for replacement. Our bullet-resistant vests are on average more than 5 years old, which means that they have outlived their manufacturer's warranty. Perhaps most striking, in our IT department, in an era of social media and advanced technologies, it is embarrassing to note that our computer-aided dispatch management system is from the early 1990s. These staffing reductions and equipment wear and tear have pushed the city to a point where essential services are now being impacted, and that is simply not a sustainable course. Further cuts in any staffing in any department would cripple city government, jeopardize our assets, and imperil public safety. We simply can cut no more. After reducing 25% of the city workforce over the last 3 years, there is nothing left to cut. We want our services, we want to maintain our buildings rather than abandon them, and yet we can't afford to catch up too much, too fast. There's too much ground to make up in a single year. That is why the budget I'm presenting tonight holds almost every department's staffing levels flat. It doesn't include new funding for any new police officers or firefighters in the coming year, but it does fully fund new hires or anticipated hires, which were only partially funded this current year. Similarly, this budget fully funds a grants writer and a risk manager, 2 positions which were only partially funded this year. These positions reduce expenses and help the city to obtain new revenue. In public works, I anticipate hiring a plumber, a facilities engineer, and a facilities maintainer. These are vacant positions which were partially funded this year, but budget constraints due to a heavy winter have delayed their being filled. This year, we should again fund them and fill them. This budget also funds minor increases in a number of areas. Increased funding for special events to allow us to capitalize on Connecticut's Coast Guard summer, for example, along with a $10,000 commitment to continue to establish a water taxi service as part of the Thames River Maritime Heritage Park proposal. Other than fixed cost and contractually mandated increases, however, there are only minor adjustments in most areas. This is primarily a hold steady budget with one notable exception: education. This budget doubles down on education, prioritizing education spending in both the school and city budgets. Nothing, absolutely nothing, is more important than education in New London. Nothing will do more to retain and attract new families to our city than an outstanding school system. Nothing will do more to spur business growth and expansion in our economy than the quality of our education system. Indeed, I believe nothing will do more to revitalize our city, not even the National Coast Guard Museum. Nothing will do more to put into action the belief in our city that everyone matters equally, because only with a quality education are all people, regardless of the nature and place of their birth, given the tools they need in order to achieve their potential and compete in an ever-changing economy. Now, we've already made great strides in changing both the reality and the perception of our schools. Last spring, Benny Dover Jackson Middle School was honored with a bronze medal by U.S. News and World Report. And this month, our Science and Technology, Mathematics and Engineering High School of Southeastern Connecticut was one of only 73 schools in the nation to be named a Magnet School of Excellence by Magnet Schools of America. Now, many people deserve credit for the progress we've made thus far, especially all of our teachers. But I would also thank interim superintendents Richard Foy and Miriam Taylor for their service in the past year. Now, with Dr. Rivera as our permanent superintendent, I fully expect that our school system will be released from state intervention in the coming year. But Dr. Rivera did not come here, nor did the members of our Board of Ed run for office to merely maintain the status quo, or worse, to watch education suffer due to ever more painful financial cuts. He came here and they ran for office to help transform our school system, and we need to give them adequate resources to accomplish this transformation. That is why my budget fully funds the Board of Education's request for a 6% increase. And in order to take fully advantage of everything our school system offers, children need to enter our schools ready to learn. The more words a child is exposed to before kindergarten, the more often a child is read to, the higher the odds are that that child will excel throughout his or her years in school. But too many parents in New London can't afford books for their children. Too many parents can't afford a computer. Poverty should not lessen a child's opportunities if they are willing to learn. And that is why my budget nearly doubles funding for the Public Library of New London. Even with this increase, however, the library will still be funded at less than the state average. In tandem with the increase in the education budget, this library funding marks the beginning of a comprehensive community-wide educational initiative. It will allow the library to expand its hours, purchase more books, hire more staff, offer more children's programs, and conduct community outreach to enable parents to read to their young children. We will also, as a city, continue to support partnerships with Connecticut College, Mitchell College, the Coast Guard Academy, along with organizations like Higher Edge and the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship Trust Funds to promote higher education as a viable option for all students who are willing to work hard and achieve success. I mentioned earlier tonight that the path to a better New London comes with a cost. My budget calls for an increase in city spending of 6%, in line with, and just a shade under, the school's requested increase. Most of this, except the library increase, merely keeps pace with contractual and fixed cost increases. This budget moves us forward, but at the smallest possible increment, so as to minimize the burden on city taxpayers. I believe that these expenditures will allow us to hold our own in most areas while increasing our support for comprehensive community education. Increasing staffing in other areas and departments, although very necessary and long overdue, will have to wait until pilot reform and growth in our grand list afford us the ability to rebuild the city government's staffing while not overburdening taxpayers. Now, after tonight, it falls upon the City Council and the Finance Board to review this budget and modify it if they so choose. In doing so, I urge them to heed the lessons of the last mayoral election year and resist any urge to inflate revenue projections for the sake of political expediency. Having turned the corner on our finances, we cannot afford to reverse course now. I also urge the Council, all members of the Council, to heed the words of Ottawa Bandele Asante, who spoke last week to the City Council in public comment in support of funding for the public library, when she said, and I quote, "The voices of the people rarely penetrate these four walls." How sad, but how true. The average New London worker makes less than $23,000 a year. 85% of our students qualify for free or reduced student lunch. when a single mom is working 2 minimum wage jobs and making bus transfers to get to work and from one job to another, it can be hard to find time to come and speak at a city council meeting or to go on theday.com or Facebook to talk about New London politics. The people of New London have bigger daily concerns and higher priorities, but no one should mistake the silence of their voices in this chamber for indifference or ignorance. The people of New London understand the stakes and want our city to move forward. They make their voices count, and they let their voices be heard when it matters most, which is at the polls in November. In November 2010, the people of our city voted 3-1 to create the strong mayor form of government. In 2011, they voted 2-1 to elect this administration. In 2013, they voted 2-1 to elect the city council majority. And in 2014, they voted again 2-1 to pass our budgets and adopt our magnet school pathway plan. If our budgets are again sent to referendum this year, and there is little doubt that they will be, then let all of the people, the same people who elect our mayor, our council, and our board of ed, decide our city's future. Put those questions to the November ballot so that the voices not often heard in this chamber can once again echo resoundingly throughout our entire city. Now, I came before you tonight to report that the state of our city is strong, and it is. Whether it remains so is a choice that we are now about to make in this budget process and in the upcoming elections. If we choose to stay on the path of fiscal responsibility and honest budgeting, if we continue to grow our grand list, lower unemployment, and lower violent crime, and if we continue to invest in our schools and make education a comprehensive community-wide initiative, then New London will no longer merely be spoken of as a city with great potential. New London will then truly be Connecticut's Renaissance city. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless New London.